For the purpose of clarifying roles and responsibility, um, one item that I know the Personnel Committee has not dealt with, his contract requires us to do an evaluation. We have not, we failed to do that, and the Personnel Committee probably did meet to develop a criteria how we can fairly evaluate our county administrator. So we were asked after this meeting, set up some time, the Personnel Committee could meet to formulate a criteria that we use to evaluate the county administrator. Right now, we don't have any criteria in place at all.
Is that the only part of the contract you're going to deal with?
Well, that's one aspect. The other aspect was, and I have to ask you about that as you move. The other aspect was your residents supposed to move in the county by August 1, but you hadn't done that as being a resident Sussex as
no. You asked me if I lived in Sussex, and I said no.
So you have a residence in Sussex?
Yes.
You have a residence in Sussex, okay.
Yes.
So that's two items in particular that I should.
But let's go back to the beginning. I don't mean to take all your time, but since we're doing this publicly, we might as well. Yeah. There also is a little provision in the contract that says that you, the board, and the county administrator, me, would sit down and set the criteria, not the personnel committee.
Okay.
To set the criteria. Now, I'm going to be evaluated on criteria that you failed to do in the first place. Really?
Go ahead.
No, I'm just pointing out.
The board, if the personnel committee will develop a criteria, that criteria will be brought back to the board for the board sanction and review. Once that criteria has been finalized, then that criteria will be utilized as an evaluation instrument to evaluate the county administrators.
Well, but again, you have got to set the parameters for which I am going to be held accountable, responsible for.
The personnel committee will develop a criteria and parameters to bring it to the board for consideration to do an evaluation. There has to be a start. So that's the function of the personnel committee. Once that criteria and parameters,
I'm going to have to beg a question.
Okay.
We've already talked about the function of the personnel committee. And
right.
I would hope some of the board members would deal with this, not just me. There is no policy that talks anything about the personnel committee. So everything that comes up is somehow, this is what we're going to do today.
The personnel committee is a personnel item. It's a personnel function. Now, the personnel committee, it is its function to develop a criteria for evaluating employees.
Let me say it again.
My
contract does not call for a personnel committee. My contract calls for the board
to do
and the county administrator
to do what?
To sit down and set the criteria for which I am going to be evaluated for over the next 12 months.
The board will.
Excuse me, you failed to do that the first 12 months, 13 months, 14 months. And if we're going to do it, we're going to follow the contract because we've already breached that to start with. So let's not do it anymore. Let's just get it straight.
The point is, what I'm making is that if the board want to sit down and develop a criteria, fine. But the personnel committee can develop the criteria, bring it to the board and the county administrator sit down and go over it. Now, if the board wishes to sit down collectively to develop a criteria, then that's fine. But right now you have no document. You have no document at all for evaluation.
Excuse me, it's not the board that's going to sit down and do anything. It is the board and the administrator by contract.
Well, the board has to set the criteria. The county administrator has to set the criteria that he will be evaluated by. That's the board function.
Then you shouldn't have written the contract that way.
Well, we will pull the contract and look at that and get an opinion. The county administrator cannot set their own criteria. How you can evaluate me?
Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. That's not even.
Why? Morrison wrote his own contract.
That's not the way personnel goes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm a little confused.
Yes, I can imagine. Go ahead.
You can imagine.
Yes.
Well, you've done it.
I'm confused. Go ahead.
If it's a personnel matter, then we need to be talking about it in a personnel committee meeting or in closed session.
I agree. That's why I said refer to the personnel committee. You're exactly right. We refer this to,
We're still in public session.
we refer this to the personnel committee to review it and to come with the criteria to evaluate the county administrator. Upon that, we will bring it back. The board can tweak it in a way they want to and meet with the county administrator with his input. And that will be formulated to utilize as a document for evaluation. Okay? And we would do that. Yes.
If I could